it still feels to me like I'm back in 1985, even though obviously I'm a lot older. I'm just saying 7 years is going to go by just like that. And you'll have some fun. You'll meet new people. You'll be interested in law school, even if you decide not to become a lawyer.
Sure. Well, I guess I'll start. I went to law school. I graduated 20 years ago, so 1998. There was a gentleman a couple years behind me who is now one of our senators for Colorado, Senator Cory Gardner. So some of you may know who he is. He's been in the news a lot recently. But to answer your question, yeah, there's a lot you can do with a law degree. I would venture to say that a law degree is the most versatile of any professional degree you can get. If you get an engineering degree, you're likely going to be an engineer. If you get a medical degree, you're likely going to practice medicine. If you get a law degree, you don't even have to practice law. You don't have to take the bar. You can write books. You can be an elected official if you wanted to. You can do, there's so much you can do. What Judge Cisneros said earlier about the bachelor's degree programs. Some of my best friends in law school, one was a Spanish major, one was an Italian major, one was an electrical engineering major. It's so diverse. And they didn't all go on to practice law. They simply took the law degree and did other things they wanted to do. So that's a very good question. And you don't have to do it. Furthermore, there are some folks that took some time off after getting their bachelor's degree and worked for companies or maybe had another profession. Some of them were accountants. And they decided after doing their years of whatever they were doing, they wanted to go back to law school. And so that's what they can do. That's a neat thing about law, too. You don't have to be young to go, you don't have to be right out of college to go right there. You can have life experience, you can do other things, and you can still have the ability to go do that.
Yeah.
I can't, oh, sorry.
I mean, I was going to say, I never thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't think about law school at all when I was in college until time to graduate. I had no idea what I wanted to do, so I honestly went to law school to push back the decision-making time about when I needed to figure out what I want to do with my life, which is, I was told later, a really dumb reason to go to law school, but that's what I did. One of the reasons also that I'm thinking of, it also sounds really silly, but I agree. A law degree is really versatile, and I first really started thinking about law school. I'm a big baseball fan, a Red Sox fan, and back in 2003, 2004, the general manager of the Red Sox, he went to law school, and then he became, the GM of the Red Sox. And again, that sounds really silly. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to go, but the point is that you can take your law degree and do all sorts of interesting stuff with it. I think it just proves to anyone, if you have graduated from law school, all it really proves is that you worked really hard and you learned a lot of different topics. You learned, had a lot of different skills. My two best friends from law school, neither one of them took the bar exam. They went to law school to get a law degree to help them kind of further their careers working in Washington, D.C., working on the Hill, doing kind of legislative kind of stuff. They had no desire ever to be a lawyer, ever. And so, and that's what they're doing now. So I know that we all became attorneys at some point, but it's definitely not required. I think it's just it was a really good and honestly fun 3 years, because you do get to learn a lot of interesting topics and a lot of different skill sets. Luckily for me, and I think probably everyone here, that I found a job that I really, really care about, really love a lot. So I got really lucky job. So.
What is it you like about that job, and how do you get paid?
So my first year of law school, you're learning kind of the basic topics, and I was a little nervous because none of them really sounded very interesting to me, and I was kind of like, what did I get myself into here? But I always wanted to do kind of non-profit kind of work, something in that realm. And there's really, when you first get to law school, a lot of the lawyers that you'll meet, they do, for-profit stuff. They work for big law firms, make a bunch of money, and that's great, but that never was what I was interested in. So I just kind of took a flyer, the internship at the public defender's office. I just generally knew what they did there, which again, very generally, if you are kind of, again, accused of a crime and can't afford your own legal representation, we help you out. Basically it. That sounded really cool to me. And it's really interesting. I mean, Sam and I work on different sides of the fence, but I think we both agree that it's very interesting working out. Sam just came from a homicide scene. It doesn't really get more interesting than that. So I really like developing relationships with my clients. You know, basically, I have probably 60, 70 clients I work with. I really like getting to know them, learning more about them, and then obviously when you are able to be successful and help someone get a good result or get what they're looking for, make sure they don't go to jail, make sure they don't go to prison, whatever the situation is. It's a really satisfying feeling, and you know, again, Sam and I are on different sides of it, but a trial is really fun. I think it's probably the most fun part. It can be the most stressful part, but you know, you watch TVs or movies and you see a jury trial, it's not exactly like that, but it's pretty similar. And you know, I think Judge Cisneros would agree, it's by far the most fun part of our job. And that all it is taking issues and arguing them, trying to convince 12 regular people like, hey, you should go with me. You know, don't believe anything Sam's telling you, or don't believe this witness, or you know, vice versa. But it is really fun. And so part of the fun is that it can be stressful and there's a lot of adrenaline involved. But at the end of the day, it sounds kind of corny, but I really just like helping my clients, and it can be a lot of the time really, really, really rewarding. And yeah, somehow they pay us to do that, so I don't know.
And on the other side of it, I enjoy my job because I get to do fun things like go to a homicide scene. I get to see what happened at the beginning of that homicide and kind of work that all the way through. I get to go to autopsies and see a body get cut open and have someone kind of tell me where the bullet traveled or how the stab wound traveled and what organs it's hit, and that's kind of fun and that's kind of cool. And then I get to organize it and put it in a trial so that 12 people sitting on a jury will find the person that's accused of the crime guilty, and that's pretty fun and exciting for me. I also like, and what's rewarding about it on the other side, Nathan represents the people who are accused. I represent the state of Colorado and those who are victims of crime, and to be able to kind of help them process what happened to them and help them kind of find a resolution and closure to it is really kind of rewarding for me. To be able to say to them, okay, I understand your pain, you're being heard, and a lot of people are working back at my office to help you get justice for the crime that you were a victim of. And that's rewarding and that's exciting to be part of.
Yolanda?
What came to mind was about the law degree generally, and what I like about the versatility of a law degree is that no matter what your interest is, there's a pretty good chance that a lawyer was involved in some shape or form. You know, the building we're sitting in, you know, they have construction regulations that they have to comply with, and you're going to find lawyers. You're going to find lawyers in government. If you're interested in entertainment, you know, celebrities have lawyers, athletes have lawyers. If you're interested in businesses, you know, businesses have lawyers. People who own businesses have lawyers. Lawyers are everywhere, and you know, some people think that's not so good, but certainly when they find trouble, the first person they want to call is a lawyer. So I would say whatever your interest is, if it's in education, there are lawyers in education. So it's a very versatile degree, and whatever your interest may be, it can work for you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Do lawyers get involved in like science fields?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I did medical law before I came to the prosecution office. I worked with anesthesiologists, and so whenever they got sued, I was the person that defended them in that. So yeah, they get involved in medical law. And that's just one aspect.
With who again?
Huh?
You work with who again?
Anesthesiologists, those are the doctors that put you to sleep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
With a law degree, is there anything you can do in the field of psychology?
Psychology and law is really interesting. That if I were to have another life, I would become a psychologist, and then I would use my law degree along with psychology to just really study people, because it's really fascinating. So not just in the criminal area, but frequently in the criminal area, we have lawyers who are working with psychologists. They have to understand how people's minds work. A lot of people are not able to go to trial because they're not competent. We have to figure out how to convince a jury about how, you know, why this person is insane and shouldn't be held liable. So psychology and being a lawyer go hand in hand.
I actually, so one of my majors is psychology in undergraduate, and it helps me a lot. We have experts that testify in trials and work with lawyers, and a lot of them are psychology experts. I've worked with experts who are lawyers and psychologists, which is really, really helpful for them to know both of those areas.
Yes, sir.
for the defense and the prosecution, how do you handle possibly sending someone who is innocent to jail or vice versa, who's guilty and is declared innocent?
That's right up Sam's Hill.
Yeah. I'll give you two stories. When I was first early in my career, when I started prosecuting felonies, I had a case involved where an African-American man was accused of, wrongfully accused of raping a woman. And the only description she could give is that it was an African-American man, that he was wearing a mechanical uniform, that typical blue one. And that was pretty much the evidence. And so they went around mechanic shops and, you know, they identified this guy. The truth of the matter is, he was out of town at the time. He was visiting his nephew at a graduation. So the defense attorney that was in the same role as Mr. Ochanan is in was able to show me, hey, here's his plane ticket, here's pictures of him, here's a statement from his boss. In addition, he took a polygraph. These are all the things to establish for me that he's not the right person for that crime. And I have an ethical obligation as a prosecutor, if someone is charged and I know that they're not guilty, to dismiss that case. So part of my responsibility was not only dismissing that case, but going back to that victim and saying, hey, we got the wrong person. Don't lose heart. We did eventually find the right person, and so that was great. And so that is part of my responsibility. When someone who is guilty is declared, or what I believe is guilty, and then is declared innocent, that's hard. I'll tell you, that's really hard. It's really hard because you have a victim that doesn't feel like they got justice. You have a victim who feels like they're scared that person may come back after them. And also, you've put in a lot of effort, you've put in a lot of work, and you want to see someone that you believe has done something wrong actually be held accountable for it. So I will tell you, those are the hardest trials to lose.
Yes, ma'am.
What if like you're representing someone who is guilty? Like,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
what if you're representing someone who is guilty?
So that's probably the number one question I get from anyone who's asking about my job, right? So my job is, if you're accused of a crime, I represent you no matter what. And that can be a really hard concept for people to understand. And what I say is that, you know, my job is certainly not for everyone. It's a very unique group of lawyers that work in my office.
But aren't you presumed innocent?
Sure, yes, you are presumed innocent. And I think that, you know, frankly, I really do see my job as just helping whoever my client is, whether they did the crime or not, to make sure that, you know, they get through the process and the system as best they can. And, you know, personally, I don't like seeing, almost in any situation, someone going to jail or someone going to prison. Even a short jail sentence can affect the rest of someone's life. Certainly going to prison can change someone's life for the worse forever. Getting a conviction for a certain crime can change your life forever. And I rarely think that the punishment that is handed out fits the quote-unquote crime. Now, Sam obviously disagrees, that's why we're on different sides. But so, whether I think my client did it really never enters into my mind, and that's not something that everyone can do. And that's and doing that job for 5, 10, 15 years, I can really take its toll on people. It luckily hasn't taken its toll on me, but you know.
There's some very important rules of law that apply in the United States generally. And the rules of law are designed to make sure that we don't have innocent people going to prison. And if we didn't have lawyers doing the work that Nathan does, that Mr. Ochanan does, there would be a lot more people in prison that didn't do the crime that they're accused of. And so it's not really a question of how can you represent somebody you know is guilty. It's really a matter of, if you think of it more globally and a bigger picture, we have an obligation as a society to make sure that the right people are locked up and that they need to be locked. And what Mr. Ochanan does is he makes sure that the government is honest. That's what he does. And so I used to do his job, and so that's the reason I can say that without any hesitation. he's got a very honorable job, and he does get paid to argue, and he does it really well. So if you ever get a chance, he'll leave you some cards or give you his number. If he's ever in a trial and you guys want to go down and see what really good lawyers do, he'll show you what really good lawyers do in keeping the system honest.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of cases where, I think if Sam and I just took off our lawyer suits for a little bit, we can say, I don't really know what exactly happened here, right?
For sure.
There's some people on this side saying, well, I think you got the guy in the suit over there, I think he did the crime. And you may have some witnesses over here saying, no, it wasn't that guy, it was this guy over here. And, that's enough information for Sam to go to trial, and then, it's my job to try to, if there's not enough evidence to convict someone, then they shouldn't be convicted. And that's, like Judge Cisneros said, is to protect innocent people, and it's also to make sure that the government's doing its job to make sure that they aren't convicting innocent people, because unfortunately, that does happen a lot. It's in the news a lot, and so it's kind of a philosophical way of looking at it. But I think we do have a lot of cases where, we don't really know exactly, no one can say for certain what happened. And in my opinion, that's not a situation where that person should be going to jail or prison if it's not clear. And the only way to make sure that happens is to have the system that we kind of have that has people like Sam on one side and people like me on the other side. It's not a perfect system, but I think that 9 times out of 10, I think the right result does happen. And that's because of kind of Sam and I go into battle a lot, and it usually works out, honestly, which is not something I always used to be. So.
Yes, ma'am.
Has there ever been, for instance, a case that's really psychologically troubling, where you just want to drop it completely or you don't want to deal with it? What do you do in that instance?
I think that Sam and I would come at it, I think we probably have different opinions. The toughest cases that I have is where, most of my clients have been through a lot of trauma in their lives, whether it's actual physical or mental abuse, or whether it's just growing up from a broken home, not having a stable family. And those experiences when you're young, being exposed to things like that can really affect your decision making, how you see things. And a lot of those people get in trouble down the road, and then when they get in so much trouble, they have to talk to someone like me, and you just I say to them, tell me more about you. Let me learn about what brought you here. Why are you in jail right now? And it's not like what did you do or what didn't you do. It's like what was your childhood like? What the last 10 years been like? And I hear a lot of really sad stories. And when there's a position where I feel really bad for my client, and I feel like he's gotten a real raw deal from the system, society in general, and then there are certain situations where I can't do anything to help that person, and I have to stand by while they go to prison for a long time, because that's what the law requires. That is really hard. I have a weird personality, like a really bad crime or a really brutal assault case or stuff like that. That just doesn't bother me. It really doesn't. And I think that to do my job, because I have a lot of cases where my clients are accused of doing a lot of really nasty things. The way my brain works, that just doesn't enter into it doesn't really bother me. So,
I use it as a motivation.
Yeah.
I've had really gruesome child abuse cases or cases against the elderly. I had a case where this lady was being locked up by her grandson, and he was physically abusing her and taking her disability money and buying weed with it. And it was the cable guy that saved her life. He came in and fixed the cable box, saw her tied up, left, and then called police and waited for the police to arrive. That was a really hard case to see what happened to that woman, but it motivated me to check all the boxes and make sure that the right result happened and he was held accountable.
I think the truth is that for both Sam and I, or anyone, with having a tough time at work, or they have a case that really is affecting them in a negative way, whether it makes them angry or sad or whatever, luckily, but we both work in really big offices, and we work with a lot of people that are going through the same thing. So I really relied on my coworkers, who have become my really good friends, to get me through those difficult cases, and can make me laugh, can make me think about other things. But if you don't have that in life, then that's how you get through things like that. So
There's a question in the back.
So, when you said earlier how you have to work closely with psychologists, do the psychologists work in your law office, or do you like seek them out at different offices or firms?
My office has to kind of contact certain doctors that we have relationships with and say, hey, can I consult with you? Can I meet with you? I have some questions. Can you meet my client? And kind of do an evaluation of them so you can tell me a little bit more about what's going on. Because I don't have a background in that kind of stuff. That's the thing I wish I knew more about was mental health. Because a lot of my clients suffer from mental health diseases. They can be bipolar, schizophrenic, all sorts of things. And frankly, I'm at a loss. So we have doctors that we have experiences with that have worked sometimes for both sides, or they work for the state and they're pretty neutral. And we reach out to them and we pay them to kind of help us know what's going on. But we don't have a doctor or psychologist or psychiatrist kind of on retainer. There's certain people that we really trust to tell us not what we want to hear, but what we need to hear to make sure we know what's going on. And same, they have kind of their own set of people they go to as well. So
How many of you heard about the deputy that got killed in Douglas County? So most of you have heard about that. That was a really tragic situation. One of the things that happened in that case is that, at least according to the news accounts, if they're to be believed, the guy was seriously mentally ill. And had somebody taken the time to get him some mental health treatment, or perhaps to get him into the mental health court, or to get him with a lawyer who represents people who have mental illness in front of a magistrate that handles mental health cases, that might not have happened. Can you talk more about that?
Sure, happy to. That's exactly right. The individual responsible for that act had a history of mental illness. In fact, I think some of the background says that he spent some time at a VA hospital up in Wyoming and was receiving some mental health treatment. He just didn't continue with that. And that could be a real problem for folks that have those type of issues, if they're not continuing to get that help. And just like Judge Cisneros said, there are specialists, and this goes back to your question about people trained in psychology, to help in those scenarios where folks need some help, they need some treatment, whatever treatment that may involve, they'd be able to get that and hopefully try to get that situation going in a different direction. Those are some of the folks that I worked with before Magistrate Johnson, certainly not at that necessarily level, but folks that require the treatment nonetheless. And the legal system provides for that as well.
And one of my coworkers, his wife, works at a place called Aspen Point here in town, which is kind of a place you can get mental health treatment. And she just got a different kind of job where the state gave Aspen Point, some other organizations, some money to help set up mental health facilities or centers in kind of rural counties. And the idea was that someone like this gentleman up in Douglas County, he had maybe better access to mental health treatment or counseling. This could all have been avoided. And some of these rural places, it's just not available. And so I think there's been a lot of recent last 10 years to really push prevention of something happening. If we could have gotten to this guy, recognize some issues before, then no crime would be committed. So that's a huge part of our job for sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you guys ever been in a case where you felt biased towards it? And if you do, what do you do in that?
So I'm biased in all my cases because I always want to win. I always want to beat people like that. And so I always think that I'm right. And that's kind of Sam, she and I, we just look at cases differently. And so I'm always going to be on the side of my client. I'm always going to be advocating for him or her. And that's the same kind of way that Sam looks at it. So there's not any case that I'm kind of working harder on one client's case than the other. So I'm always biased, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree I am too, but I think also if I really feel like I'm looking at a case in a way that I shouldn't, that I'm taking it probably too personal or it hits too far home, what I will do is go and talk to a colleague and say, hey, let me just give this case blind. Look at the reports. Tell me if you're thinking the same way I'm thinking. And if they're telling me that they see it completely different and I'm seeing it in a harsher light and I can't get myself off of that, then I'll ask for the case to be reassigned to another deputy DA. And my office is willing to do that. We have over 80 attorneys, so that can easily be done. And there are times where you may know the witness, you may know a victim, and so it's not appropriate for us to be on the case. And so I have had to have cases reassigned because I have a personal relationship with that victim.
Well, I wonder if you can address the interplay between domestic relations work and mental health. In what circumstance would there be?
Certainly. In contested custody cases where you have moms and dads who don't agree on parenting plans for their children, there are provisions in the law for a mental health professional to be appointed by a court to do an investigation, to talk to mom and dad and frequently the children, to do home visits, and then make recommendations about parenting time when the parents just don't see eye to eye. We use mental health professionals there.
We also use lawyers we used to call them guardians ad litem, now we call them children's legal representatives, to go in and argue to the judge about what the best interest of the kids should be, to convince the judge to issue certain orders about the kids.
And sometimes you have moms and dads and the recommendation is that they need therapy.
Right.
And so they'll be
So one
referred
of
to
the things
that.
you can see is that the law is really varied. So you can be a legislator, you can pass the laws that the courts are required to follow, you can do family law, you can do criminal law, you can be a prosecutor, you can be a defense lawyer, you can be a mental health advocate, you can be a mental health lawyer, you can become a magistrate, you can become a judge, you can go do something else like teach, you can become a professor at a law school or at a high school or at a college. So that law degree that we started talking about gives you lots of opportunities that a lot of other areas don't open for you. Yes, ma'am.
Do you ever like get nervous when you're in trial?
All the time.
Certainly the more, I used to get so nervous that I couldn't sleep the night before. And then I'm wondering why at 2 in the afternoon I'm falling asleep at the table. But, I've been doing it for 7 years now. I've done well over 100 jury trials. I've done murder trials. I've done really simple cases like DUIs, kind of simple assault cases. And so this is going to sound arrogant, but I really don't get nervous anymore because I've just done the same way. And a lot of other people have been done scenarios too. I've just done it so many times that I feel confident that no matter what happens, whatever surprises there are, I can figure it out. And that's going to probably, go badly for me one day, but I really just say that as I'm saying it out loud. But I think we always get nervous. So one of my friends at work, they were in trial this week, and it was a really big case, and the consequences that they lost were huge. And I think they really believed that their client was innocent. And they're both very talented lawyers, and they did a fantastic job. And you wouldn't know it from watching them, but I can tell you right now how nervous they were. And when you're sitting there, Sam can tell you from the opposite side, when you're waiting for the verdict, and the judge says, the jury has a verdict, and you have to sit there and wait like 10 minutes while it gets organized to
That's when I get nervous.
Guilty or not guilty. There's not a more stressful time I've ever had in my entire life. But that's also kind of why some of us do this job, because, kind of in a way addicted to that kind of adrenaline.
Yeah.
It's fun. That's what it comes down to. If my job wasn't fun, I would not do
Absolutely.
it. There's no way. So, but yeah, everyone gets nervous.
If you had a child who committed like a serious crime, how would you prosecute them?
I'm sorry?
If you had a child who committed like a serious crime, how would you prosecute them?
We do have children that are charged with crimes. It depends on their age, or whether they go through the juvenile program, and they have a little bit different way of dealing with them. When we're dealing with juveniles that are charged as juveniles, what the goal is to rehabilitate, and really to try to get them the help that they need. If they're charged as an adult, then they're treated like an adult, they're sentenced like an adult. But a lot goes into that before we determine to charge them as an adult. There's a lot of evaluations that has to be done. It definitely has to be certain crimes that involve that. But generally, juveniles go through the juvenile system. We have DAs that are juvenile prosecutors, and we have judges that deal with those cases on a routine and regular basis. And the goal is to rehabilitate.
Yeah, I have one of those cases right now where my client is accused of a very serious crime. He's only 16, but the prosecutor's office wants to treat him like he's an adult, and so the the consequences are way different if you're treated like a kid or an adult. And so, someone asked before, when I got assigned the case, my first thought was, I really wish I knew more about psychology. And I sought out a lawyer in my office that has that background to help me get through it, because when you're dealing with children and brain development and that kind of stuff, you ever go in that field, it's super interesting. It's kind of overwhelming for me because I don't know a lot about it, but at the end of the day, the judge is going to decide, taking everything into account, society, victims' families, this kid, what he's been through, what he hasn't been through, what's the right thing to do here? And it's, you know, my job to try to convince the judges that
Get paid to argue. Now, I'll go back to your case, sir, about what happens if cases don't come in, what do you do? Well, that's a totally different topic. But when you have your own practice, for example, like Yolanda and I do, you spend a lot of time with other attorneys. You develop what's called a reputation, okay, in the sense that I don't practice the type of law that Yolanda does, but I have a client that is going through that situation and needs that advice. I know Yolanda, so for example, I'll say, why don't you contact Ms. Finnick? And vice versa. Yolanda knows a lot of other attorneys in town that she's able to give referrals to. That's what you're trying to spend your time on. It's marketing. You're trying to get your name out there and your reputation, so you get those types of referrals and those types of cases. If you're lucky, you have a lot of cases coming in, but there's always going to be lean times where you don't have a lot to do. So what do you do in that time? You catch up. You go out and you market. You do other things that you put off. And so I guess in a roundabout way to your question, if you're not arguing, you're not lawyering, you're obviously not getting paid. But it gives you an opportunity to get caught up on other things. That's my answer.
Good lady in the back.
When you're talking to a jury, do you do anything to help them believe you or what you're saying?
It's a lot of theater.
It is.
It's a lot of theater.
that's what makes, like, not to interrupt you, but that's what makes the best lawyers, is they can, there are just some lawyers who, they could sell you anything, and I've seen some lawyers who are, you know, real too much with Sam sitting here, but there'll be a story where it's like, oh, are you busy tomorrow? I'm like, no, like, you should go watch so-and-so. They're gonna argue this point in court. And then I'm sitting there like, what are they gonna do? Like, there's no way that's gonna happen. And then I'll go and I'll be sitting there, I'm like, I'm actually buying this. Because that's why they're the best lawyers. And people just know who the best lawyers are. Or, you know, I've certainly been in trial with, you know, sometimes I really don't like the prosecutors, so I don't root for them, obviously, but sometimes I'm in court watching and I'll just think like, wow, that was a really good argument. Like, I'm angry they came up with it, because now I'm looking like I'm gonna lose here, but that was really creative. So you have to be creative, you have to be credible, and the way that you really do that is say it with confidence, and that just comes from experience, but
And it
that's
is
the
a lot
best.
of theater.
Yeah,
It's a lot
it
of
is.
theater.
Oh, yeah.
It's projecting your personality, you know, like Mr. Ramirez said, trial work is not for everybody, but for those of you it's for, it's just so much fun to convince people that you're right.
If you ever do like
the craziest
debate,
things ever.
yeah, like you have to take a point, like you have to get really creative, and that's where it comes. That's the fun part too, where it's like, I'm sure Sam does this to her job, where I have a case, I'm like, man, I don't know what I'm gonna do here, and I'll get 4 or 5 of the best lawyers I think in my office to help me brainstorm. How are we gonna convince a jury of this when it looks real bad right now? And that's where you get some really interesting points, and there's debate, and that's where it's really fun. And
And
I'd
you
say
throw
that's the same
things
thing.
and stories,
Yeah.
and you make connections. You all must know about OJ at this point, right? Because OJ keeps getting in trouble, right? How much do you think his lawyer got paid to represent? A lot of money, right? And one of the things, if you go back and you Google him, you'll come up with some clips from some of the things that his lawyer was doing. There were a lot of people that just thought he was guiltier than sin, but he wasn't found guilty. And that lawyer had just quite a talent of creating lots of different theater. And that's part of the fun of being a trial lawyer. Let's see, young lady in the middle. Yes, ma'am.
As a family lawyer, what are your most common cases?
I would say the most common are divorce cases, and then equally as common would be contested custody cases.
Yes, ma'am.
Like, do you get paid more for some cases, like, than others? Do more cases?
I
So-
get paid more for cases that take longer. Because my clients pay me an hourly rate. So if the case takes a long time, then they pay more.
And if they fight a lot, then the clients are going to pay more money because it requires more work for the lawyer, because the clients sometimes don't want to listen to the lawyer. So the lawyers will get paid, their hourly rate, and how much that ends up being. Frequently, domestic relations depends on how well behaved the parties are. Because domestic relations is really hard on people. Family law, those are tough cases.
Private lawyers can get paid more based on the case. The attorneys that work for the government,
No.
it's the same rate, no
Yeah.
matter what. Ms. Burney can try a case against a shoplifter, and it's the same amount as she tried the case against a person charged with murder. It's
Like
the same.
When you guys are laying in bed and you see Frank Azar's commercials come on, I know you've seen them. He's a personal, the strong arm, exactly. So he does personal injury work. Those lawyers frequently get paid only if they win. We call those contingency fees, but those lawyers get paid only if they win. Or if they settle the
If they
case,
settle.
they'll get a percentage of the settlement. That's how they get paid. Yes, ma'am.
As a judge or magistrate, what's one thing like in the courtroom that you can't stand?
People come in with Starbucks.
So this is a great.
I'm gonna take
Okay, late lawyers, sloppy lawyers, unprepared lawyers, Starbucks lawyers.
Well,
What else?
late with Starbucks.
So yesterday I was doing a
Stop at
trial,
Starbucks.
and it was a really serious case, and one of the public defenders, not one of the ones that was trying the case, but one that wanted to come in and watch, stopped to get Dutch Brothers on the way in. So I looked at her and I gave her the evil Justice Narrows look, and I said, and I couldn't say it out loud because the jury was sitting there, so I gave her the evil look, and she said, and she had to take the coffee out. She didn't come back. So I guess she wanted to drink the Dutch Brothers more than she wanted to watch it try.
I was doing a trial with Justice Narrows.
And I probably yelled at him about coffee in the courtroom.
She didn't, but that's okay. But there's some people that wanted to watch because they had heard about the trial and they're like, oh, you should go watch this trial that Nathan's doing. And, I had to remind everyone that if you're coming to watch, you can't bring coffee into the courtroom.
It's
You
not a
just-
cyber cafe, it's
You
a court of
you
law.
can't do it. So some 3 or 4 lawyers came in to watch, and there was a break, and I went outside to the hallway to talk to someone. And right outside the judge's courtroom, there's like 4 or 5 cups of coffee on the ground right outside because they just knew they had to put it there. It's like a.
There's been a loss of respect for institutions, okay? And when I was a practicing lawyer, it would not have occurred to me to walk either in late or with the Starbucks, or late because I stopped to get a Starbucks. It's just bad. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the 7 years that it took you to become like a lawyer or whatever, was there any like special requirements like going back to when you said like the whole like it takes like theater and like emotion, like were there any special requirements that it took to like teach you how to like remain composed?
I think that's kind of what you learn. That's what they're going to teach you in law school. You
Yeah.
know, like there are some lawyers who they never want to. People go to law school and they want to be the types of lawyers who actually never set foot in a courtroom, and they need to learn how to like argue and be compelling and be really interesting to watch. But if you go to law school and you think, I really like doing trials, it's really fun, you can specialize in that. You can take classes that teach you how to get better at it.
You can represent people when you're a law
Yeah.
student. My first case was against a lady, my client was accused of having a vicious dog, and so they wanted to put the dog to death. I was just probably a second-year law student, and I went in there and I represented the lady who owned the dog, but really I was representing the dog. So you can do that and learn trial skills while you're in law school.
And I think the cool thing about law school is that you don't, like, you guys are all, like, so far away from that, but you don't have to, whatever age you're at right now, you don't have to say, like, here's the 9 things I gotta do in this timeline to be able to go to law school. You can do whatever you want, and when you go to law school, if you decide to go to law school, the people you meet, like she said, have done everything background-wise, and don't feel like you need to, like, I need to take these classes because 3 years from now I'm gonna be in law school. Like, it doesn't work like that. That's what's really cool. Like, if you want to be a doctor, you better start taking science classes from day number 1, but like, you don't have to do that for law school, at least in my opinion, so.
One
I
other
think
point
it's
too, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was actually going to build on something you had said earlier, that you don't have to go straight through from college to law school. So after college, I worked in the environmental field for 5 years as a consultant and then at a foundation doing environmental policy work. And the reason I decided to go to law school was that in that policy work, I worked with people who had been to law school and they were the most powerful people working on those issues. They had a really different way of thinking that allowed them to dive into a question of, what the law should be. How should we address this social problem or this environmental problem or this mental health problem? And what do we want the law to be? And so those were the people that inspired me to go to law school. So I went to law school 5 years after being in college. I loved it and had a great time. And there were a lot of people in my law school who were coming after, 10 years in the insurance industry or 20 years as a social worker. And so you can come in at a different time, you can go for your own reasons, and then I'll just make a quick plug for those of you who may not be interested in being in the courtroom and being on your feet and having to be theatrical. There's a whole lot of really interesting work that happens behind the scenes. You can do transactional work, you can do work like where I am now, where you're arguing or helping people figure out what the law should be, how the policy should work. So, right, so transactional work, you know, there's an awful lot of things that get negotiated between people. When you buy a house, when you start a business, when your business enters into a contract with another business, all those things have to be ironed out and written down so everyone knows how you're going to do this. And that's work where you're not going in front of a judge, you're sitting with another attorney or another person saying, well, how about if we do it this way, and if you meet these deadlines, and then I'll, you know, fulfill these obligations. And so that's just a whole different way of practicing that might speak to some of you who don't necessarily want to stand in court and argue, but are very excited about, you know, the way the law works and how it functions and how it helps people or hinders them.
One more point that you had mentioned about getting ready to do that. Do you learn to do that? How do you get prepared to do that? I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but I know my law school did it. I think a lot of traditional law schools did it too, but it's called the Socratic method. Okay? And what that means is, I never went through it before. I didn't do it through high school. I certainly did it in college. But law school, they teach by the Socratic method. What that means is, imagine you're sitting in your class right now. I'm not sure what grade you're in.
I'm a freshman.
Okay, you're a freshman. So imagine sitting in a class, and instead of the teacher just lecturing and putting stuff on the board and running through the syllabus, they go through something and say, okay, today we did chapter 1 in biology. Miss so-and-so, why don't you go ahead and tell us what chapter 1's all about? What are you going to say? What would any of you say right now if your professors asked you that? Probably wouldn't know what to say, but that's how law school does. You're going to read cases, you're going to prepare them like real lawyers do, and you better be prepared to talk about them the next day because they're going to call them.
What they do in law school is teach you how to think like a lawyer. They don't necessarily teach you the law. They teach you how to think like a lawyer, because if you can think like a lawyer and you can think logically, you can analyze any problem that's in front of you and come up with some answer. So that's really what law school does, and what that Socratic method that he was talking about teaches you. Yes, ma'am.
How do you decide whether or not someone's going to be able to get bail or good behavior in jail and get out early? How do you make that decision?
There are a whole bunch of things that go into that. The crime is maybe, prior criminal history weighs into that. I think we are getting away from, historically, we've tended to keep poor people in jail. So if you commit, let's suppose you commit some sort of assault and it carries a $10,000 bail, and your colleague right next door to you commits the same crime. If she has money to be able to pay her bond, she can get out. If you don't have money to be able to pay your bond, you can't get out, even though both of you are accused of exactly the same crime. So that doesn't really seem fair, does it? Just because you're poor, you can't get out of jail. So the legislature, which has a lot of lawyers involved in it, has gone in and made a lot of changes to the bail system so that we're not punishing people and keeping them in jail just because they're poor. And so there's a tool that we're supposed to use that very few people use, but they've made some changes. We really consider the person in the circumstances and all of that. It's not exactly a fair system. It's getting better, but we have a lot more work to do in that regard.
I mean, for the most part, the more serious crime you're accused of committing, the more likely it is you're going to be in jail for.
If you commit a murder, you're not getting out.
Yeah. If you steal like
You kill somebody, you're not getting out.
if you steal a pack of gum from 7-Eleven, they're probably not going to keep you in jail. And then obviously that's a huge spectrum, but generally speaking, the more serious crime that you're accused of, the less likely you're going to get out of jail. So.
Unless you have money. I mean, if you have money, you can get out of jail no matter what your crime, except for homicides, murders. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so during the time that you're in school, like, do you guys do work, like, for money that you're getting?
You have a job?
Yeah. Like
Some people do, some people don't. I worked all the way through law school. I actually had a child when I was in law school. I was pregnant with my second child when I was taking the bar exam. So, that's not the ideal situation, but it's something that I was bound and determined to do. So I had a job, I had kids, and I went to law school, and it was tough.
A lot of people, when I went to law school, wouldn't work full-time, because school was full-time for the most part, but that's when if you can find jobs in where you're ever going to school, working with other lawyers, they can pay you a little bit of money, then for the most part you get to learn, like, man, I really like that. I worked for this one lawyer. I really thought I wanted to do immigration law at some point, helping people kind of deal with immigration. And there's one lawyer I met, she hired me, worked for her part-time, and I realized I just really didn't like it that much. There wasn't anything personal with her, it just didn't speak to me, and so I just kind of went another direction, and that's when I started working in the public defender's office. So a lot of people work part-time, one, to make money, to earn money, and two, to like figure out, is this what I want to do, or do I want to try something else? So yeah,
And
most
some-
people work that a lot.
Yeah, and some schools, like this, I went to the University of Connecticut, and it was a great school, and it had a night program. So some students were coming, they were working full-time and going through the night program. They might do the night program for their first year, and then transition to the day program, for their second and third years. There's a lot of flexibility depending on the school you go to. I also had a child while I was in law school, and my school was great in accommodating that and helping me, manage school and the child and getting a job and all of that.
A couple more questions, then we're going to take the quiz, because we have prizes. We have 2 prizes, so back there in the back, and then,
So, I'm sorry, I don't know your guys' name very
that's
well.
okay.
But the family lawyer, so if you don't have citizenship, and like you're trying to go through like a divorce or like child custody, how does that work out?
That's a good question, and what you're asking me is about 2 areas of law, immigration and family law. And I would consult with an attorney who does immigration to see how that intersection would impact my client. And I know that didn't really answer your question. It's just really, it depends. It may not matter, I don't know.
In terms of getting a divorce, even if you don't have citizenship, I can give you a divorce. Even if you're not a citizen and you're not a legal U.S. resident, I can still divide up your kids. Does that make sense? Does that answer? Was that the question you were trying to find out? The answer?
Yeah, because like a lot of people go through that, and I was just wondering how exactly that would work, because like I wouldn't know if like citizenship would be a problem between like the kids, because like what if the kids were born here, but the parents aren't, so like would that like be
That's a
problematic?
really complicated area right now.
Especially right now.
Especially right now. It's just a really complicated area.
But I've never had a judge say, deport a
No,
family
we
or
don't.
separate
So-
the children, or I've never had that happen.
We do not do that. What we do as judges is, you all come in with a problem, we sort out your problem according to what the law is and what the issues are in the case. But we don't, so if we have parents who aren't citizens, we don't pick up the phone and call immigration. That's none of our business. Our business is just dealing with the problem that the parties brought into court for us. And we'll issue orders based on what their circumstances are, but we don't take any steps usually beyond that. Sometimes I'll have a case where maybe the parents are beating up the kid and I need to make sure that the Department of Human Services goes and looks at it. Then I'll take some action. But generally speaking, judges just deal with the problem that the parties bring in. We don't take any outside action, and we don't do any of our own investigation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Prosecuting people in like law enforcement or other people with higher power?
Yeah, we do prosecute law enforcement. Sometimes what we have is what we call officer-involved shootings, where an officer in their line of duty has shot someone. We have to determine if, when that officer fired their firearm, did they do it in a way that was required for officer safety? Was it justified in any way? Or was it overkill? And so essentially what happens is, if it is a officer that is Colorado Springs Police Department, then El Paso County Sheriff's Department is the one that investigates it. And then they bring the case to us, we review the investigation, we make a determination if that officer should be charged or not. So we do prosecute officers. We have done it when we felt that the shooting of their gun or whatever action they did was not justified.
Let's go ahead and take our quiz real quick. It should take less than 5 minutes. And any remaining time, we'll finish up answering the questions.
So while I'm setting that up, let me just ask, so are all of you able to access the internet on your phones, or is there anyone who wants paper and pen? Paper and pen, okay. would you mind? Anyone who wants paper and pen, just let me know. And so let me explain to you how that's going to work. So those who want to answer by paper and pen, you're going to grade the quiz yourself, and I'm going to just trust you on, go ahead and trust, I'm just going to trust you on honor system, so you're actually going to be in a separate pool from those who are able to log in and play Kahoot on the website in terms of winning the prize.
And while she gets that set up, every single one of us up here is willing to spend time with you. If you have any more questions about law school, if you want to come down and hang out with me for a day, I'm happy to have you, really. I've got cars, you can call me. If you want to set up a time to come down, I'm happy to do that. If you want to talk to your parents first and say, is it okay if I go to this scenario? You're absolutely welcome to do that. My door is always open to all of you, and I suspect that all of these lawyers will tell you the same thing. So it's important to us that we expose you to the things that you're interested in. And it's fun. It's fun to watch Mr. Ocean or Ms. Murray have a fight in court, or for me to tell everybody at Starbucks they have to leave. I'll leave my cards over here for any of you who want one.
So it's like, so there could be 10 murders in a day. and it's
Sir?
all of it,
Well, no, but most people are very smart.
And Judge Johnson, you're not going to get focused on it.
So I haven't time for that one.
In the beginning, was it disturbing?
In the beginning it was. And then you get used to it. It's another product. It sounds cool. It sounds cool. The only ones that bother me are the ladies.
I just had a really hard time working with them. Those are the babies are the only ones that bother
I like the guy next to me is the fireman.
So, is there anyone who doesn't know what website to go to? And those of you who are using pen and paper, just put just your first name on the paper. Anybody else who still needs to log in online? Go ahead. Okay, I think we're So don't, is everyone who's doing by pen and paper, are you ready to go? Okay.
You all should have caught that one right.
That was softball.
We did.
Let's see, who's taking civics? Let's see.
Where's the law?
I don't know the answer to that one.
Not so much when it's.
Thank goodness.
You got to pull out actual photos.
So the winner of
Nice.
the online version is Danya or Dania?
What happened, man? You were speaking.
Come on, right up here. We're gonna have you stand right up here in front. It'll just be brief, just.
No, I got my questions. We're gonna ask you a bunch of questions.
Will.
You guys can keep it if you want it, or you can give it to me at the end. Depends on when you can.
Here, you can have my seat while you're here. That's okay. I'll hold my hand behind my back, and she'll choose one, and then the other one will choose one. So while Administrator Johnson's calculating the written version, there were a couple of final questions. Who had a question that we didn't answer? Yes, sir.
As a judge, do you handle everything from like murder cases to what Judge Judy does, or is there like?
Judge Judy, I think, does TV show judging, and she does neighborhood disputes. So that's like a people's court with a bad attitude.
But is that, would you still handle?
I could
cases
do all of that, yes.
Or could you just, like, if you wanted to just do like that style where it's between two people suing each other, could you do that?
I do cases with two people suing each other. Her style of judging is highly frowned on by our Supreme Court. We just really don't want our judges behaving like that in real life courtroom. But I can do any of the things that she does. In terms of the law that she does, I can do any of those things. Remember, I said I can do anything from a speeding ticket all the way up to imposing a death sentence. That includes civil litigation, property disputes, family law, taking kids away from their parents forever, giving your kids back to their parents forever, anything I can do. I can't do appeals because I'm not an appellate person. But in terms of the regular trial work or courtroom work, I can do anything.
Kind of do it, county judge.
Oh, I do the county court judge appeals, and I also do, so if Magistrate Johnson had a case and they were appealing her, if I was doing probate, she's a probate magistrate right now, but if I was doing probate, I would do her appeal.
So like, how do you deal with like those cases where you have to sentence someone to death?
I've never had to do it, I hope I never do have to do it. I think it would make me sick to my stomach. And I would do it if I was required to, because when I became a judge, I took an oath to uphold the law. But that would not be something I would feel very good about. But there are a lot of cases I don't feel very good about, but I don't have the option of disregarding the law to do what I want to do. Because, like I said, I took an oath to uphold the law, and I'm required to follow the law. Even if I disagree with it, I'm still required to follow it. Yes, sir. One young man had, yes, sir.
What's the longest you've ever sentenced someone?
976 years. You want to know what kind of case it was and how I arrived at the sentence?
Yeah.
There was a guy who was a serial rapist, and he was breaking into elderly women's homes. The women were like 85, 75 years old. He would break in, he would rape them, he would stab them, he would clean them up, throw them in the shower and clean them up with Lysol. And so he finally got caught because he broke into this woman's house. She was 85 years old, she was packing, so she shot him. And so that was how he got caught. And so they went to trial and he was convicted. And I had a lot of victims. And the reason I decided to impose consecutive sentences is because I thought that each victim needed to know that I thought her crime was serious. And so the only way I could send that message was to impose them consecutively, to stack the sentences. So I issued one sentence for one victim, issued another sentence for another victim, ran those two after each other. We call that consecutively, instead of at the same time. And it ended up being 976 years. I know he's not going to serve 976 years. That's a physical impossibility. But that was the only way I could figure out to make sure that that the punishment met the crimes, because there were a lot of them, and it was really nasty and really ugly. So, what other questions do you have?
Have you ever been discriminated against?
Yes, I'll tell you a story. When it came up in the context of, it's not really discriminating against. I can tell you a couple of stories. It's happened to me my entire life. I'll tell you two very specific stories. One is I was doing a case, and there were some witnesses, and they didn't like what my ruling was. And so their comment to me was, what does she know? She's just a speck. So one of the things I could have done is gotten mad and sent him to jail, because that's something I could have done, held him to court and sent him to jail. But I needed to take the high road, okay? I needed to say, you know what, I'm better than they are, and so I'm going to disregard what they told me. That's not really discrimination, but it's an example of, even given my position, it still happens. Another time, I think and it wasn't necessarily discrimination, it was, well, I'll just tell you the story. I used to be a public defender. I told you I used to do what Mr. Ogenin does. And I was out doing an investigation for a crime, and I got out of my car, I had my investigator with me, I walked into an apartment complex, I knocked on the door, that's all I did. And nobody answered, so I got back in my car, investigator came with me, we were driving down the road and we got stopped. And the cops were inquiring, well, why, what business do you have over that apartment complex? What I could have done is lose my temper with the cop and say, you know what, you have no business stopping me. Instead, what I did is I said, I just explained what I was doing. Why did I do that? Even though I was upset at the cop for doing what he did, I wasn't going to make the situation worse by just bad-mouthing the cop for what I thought was an inappropriate, a violation of my Fourth Amendment. So I just told him what it was I was doing. And he let me go on my way. Other people will react and lose their temper and start fighting with the cop. That's not a good outcome. You'll lose that battle. And I'm smart enough to know that. And so those are circumstances where even in my position, even with a law degree, I'm still going to face that my entire life. And that's not going to change. So you just learn how to deal with it. When I was young, much younger, I might have lost my temper and maybe been tempted to say something stupid. Now that I'm old and gray, I know better. So you have to make tough decisions in life. And you always want to aim for the best outcome for yourself. And sometimes you just have to let things roll off your back. And I'm pretty good about that. I've got a lot of experience letting things roll off my back.
I think there's a lot of, I've never been discriminated against, it sounds like I have, but, I have seen a lot of, whether it's police officers, judges, people in position of power really, sometimes it's pretty obvious, sometimes it's subtle, who really don't treat female attorneys very fairly, I think.
That's a very true statement. I'm treated differently than the male judges, make no mistake about it.
It's kind of shocking to me that happens, but I've seen it. Lawyers in my office talk about it. Some lawyers in my office talk about it, and I've absolutely witnessed it too. So I don't really know what can be done about that. But
We have a lot of work to do with our society, okay? It's not getting better right now, it's getting worse, but hopefully at some point it will start getting turned around and it'll be getting better. We've made a lot of progress over the last 50 years, but clearly we'll have a lot more progress to do. But don't let those kinds of things stop you. And you can get angry about them, I still get angry about them, it's how you handle anger, really.
You guys can make it better too. You're the next generation.
Yeah.
You guys can make it better.
My law school, I graduated from law school in '83, and my law school class was the first class that had 50% women. Before that, it was mostly males. And so we have made a lot of progress, but you know what? We've got a lot more progress to make, and every single one of us in this room has responsibility toward fixing what ails our country. And I hope that all of you consider that seriously. So thank you all. We have enjoyed this tremendously. We hope it has been helpful to you. My cards are up here. You're welcome to come and spend time with me.
I have cards as well if you want some.
All of you
Before
are welcome to do
we
that.
leave, on behalf of the Educating Children of Color Summit, we have a gift for Judges Meadows and Magistrate Johnson.
Thank you. And we'll Also, you're headed over for the scholarships and laptops. Good luck to all of you.
Thank you.
Of course.